This happened just a week ago. I'm 32 and work as a nursing assistant at Riverside Hospital. I do night shifts to support my family while I study for my nursing degree. It's a small, aging hospital. Most nights are quiet, which I like. The smell of antiseptic fills the air, mixed with old paint, and sometimes the flickering fluorescent lights make me uneasy. But that night felt different. I can't shake what happened. On the third night of my shift, I noticed something strange. I walked to the maternity ward to check on a few patients. Suddenly, the automatic doors swung open by themselves. I paused. It was late, so maybe they just malfunctioned. A chill ran through me. I walked past them feeling silly for thinking it was anything. Over the week, I had more odd encounters. While filling out paperwork in one of the rooms, I heard whispers. They echoed down the empty hall. I turned, but nobody was there. It could have been my imagination. Maybe I was too tired. Still, I knew I heard something. My stomach twisted with unease. Later that week, while monitoring patients, I heard a baby monitor crackling to life. At first, I thought there was some interference, but then I heard a faint lullaby. It sounded sweet and gentle, but felt wrong in the quiet of the hospital at night. I walked toward the source, but as I got closer, it fell silent. My heart raced. I thought about turning it off, but I hesitated. Deep down, I sensed something was off and didn't want to acknowledge it. The following night, things grew stranger. I saw shadows skimming the corners of my vision. They darted away just when I tried to follow them. I squinted into dark hallways, my unease deepening. I was exhausted, sure, but I felt something darker lurking in those shadows. I tried to shove it aside, but it nagged at me. Finally, during my last round, I turned to leave a room and froze. There in the doorway stood a figure. It looked like a mother cradling her baby. I blinked, and she vanished in an instant. My mind raced. Was I seeing things? Was I too tired? I didn't know, but just as I turned back to the patients, I heard her whisper, "Help us." My heart dropped. I can't decide if these encounters were real, or just my mind playing tricks on me. I remember the feeling, the chill creeping down my spine. What did I see? What did I hear? I still think about those moments. The whispers and shadows feel like nightmares that refuse to fade. What happened in that hospital? The memories linger, making it hard to forget. The next night, I walked into Riverside Hospital with a knot in my stomach. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was overthinking everything. I clocked in and made my way down the dimly lit halls, the overhead lights buzzing. I passed the maternity ward, and the automatic doors didn't open this time. I sighed, relief mixing with lingering anxiety. After a few uneventful hours, I sat in the break room staring at my phone. I scrolled through social media, but it brought little comfort. Thoughts of that woman in the doorway crept back. Help us. Who were they? What did they need? I couldn't help but feel the weight of their plea. On my next round, I approached a patient I had checked on earlier. A soft groan emanated from her room. When I entered, I found her staring blankly at the ceiling. Her eyes darted as if she saw something I couldn't. "Are you okay?" I asked, but she didn't respond. Instead, her eyes flickered to the corner of the room. I turned to follow her gaze, but there was nothing there. "Just go back to sleep," I urged gently. Her body relaxed, but I felt a shiver run down my spine. Something wasn't right. As I moved toward the nursery, I heard another lullaby float through the air. It hung there, haunting yet familiar. My heart raced. I recognized it. It was the same lullaby I had heard before. I paused. The sound resonated from the far corner of the nursery. Gathering my courage, I crept closer. The room was dim, the glowing monitors casting shadows. I squinted to see if I could find the source, but as I stepped inside, the sound stopped. Silence rushed in, heavy and suffocating. I scanned the area, feeling a chill crawl up my back. Then, I saw something. A small toy, a stuffed bear, sat on one of the cribs, completely out of place. I definitely hadn't seen it there before. My imagination ran wild, filling my head with all the scary possibilities. Hesitant but drawn to it, I stepped forward. Just as I reached to touch it, the lullaby started again. Only this time, it was louder, more urgent. "Help us." I jerked my head back, adrenaline surging. The sound enveloped me. I spun around, heart pounding, searching for the figure I couldn't see. The air felt electric, charged with something I couldn't grasp. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaking. The lullaby stopped, and a hush fell over the room. I stood frozen, holding my breath. That's when I saw it. A faint silhouette, barely visible, at the far end of the nursery. It looked like the woman from before, cradling her baby once more. "Help us," she whispered, her voice like a breeze that made my skin prickle. I took a step back, colliding against the crib. Fear stabbed me. I wanted to run, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. Just as I opened my mouth to scream, the lights flickered violently. They went out. Darkness enveloped me, and I felt my heartbeat echoing in my ears. Then everything went dark. I froze in the dark, the chilling silence pressing in on me. My breath quickened as I strained to hear anything. Footsteps, whispers, even the faintest sound. But there was nothing. I reached for my phone, praying the light would cut through the suffocating blackness. When I switched on the flashlight, the beam cut through the shadows and illuminated the nursery. My heart raced as I scanned the cribs, the walls, and the faint outline of the door. The woman was gone. I blinked, expecting her silhouette to reappear, but nothing stirred. The lullaby now faded to a whisper, a distant echo in my mind. I took a tentative step forward, the floor creaking under my weight. "Hello?" I called out, my voice quavering. No response, just the emptiness. Suddenly the lights flickered back on, casting a sterile glow over everything. I sighed in relief but felt unease settle back in. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. A glance at the cribs revealed they were empty. My pulse raced as I recalled the stuffed bear on the edge of one crib. It still sat there, an eerie reminder of the woman's presence. Something cold brushed against my ankle, and I jumped back, almost tripping over a chair. My heart raced further. I squatted to see what it was, the child's toy. But how had it moved? I hadn't touched it. I reached out for it, but as soon as I grasped its fuzzy paw, the temperature in the room plummeted. An icy chill wrapped around me, and I could see my breath fogging in front of me. This was no coincidence. There was something in this nursery that didn't belong. "Help us," I heard again. This time it was clearer, and I turned sharply. The voice wasn't just in my head anymore. It was as if it echoed from everywhere. It lured me toward the far wall, where shadows danced and twisted in ways I didn't understand. As I approached, the lullaby resumed, hauntingly sweet, yet laced with urgency. I gripped the bear tightly, a feeble shield against the rising dread. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice rising above the melody. "What do you want?" The lullaby stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft, almost sad breathing. I stepped back, unnerved. My mind raced, filled with images of the woman and her baby. Had I seen a ghost? Was this a trick of my exhausted mind? But then I noticed something on the wall, a series of crayon drawings all depicting the same scene. A woman holding a child, desperately reaching out. Each picture was faded, but the emotion behind them was unmistakable. Panic coursed through me. They were trying to communicate something. "Where are you?" I whispered, my resolve breaking. I realized I had to know, had to find some clarity amidst this chaos. I backed away slowly, trying to stay calm, but before I could leave the room, the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't just dim, they went out completely. I was plunged into darkness once more. Panic surged. My pulse raced as I felt the presence around me grow stronger. I strained to hear anything besides my ragged breath. That's when I heard it. A faint cry, echoing through the dark. It was desperate and filled with sorrow. I stumbled toward the sound, clutching the bear like a lifeline. I had to help them. I had to know what was happening. I pressed deeper into the darkness, listening to that distant cry. It tugged at my heart, a primal call for help that I couldn't ignore. The air around me felt thicker, every breath a labor. Shadows twisted ominously, and I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. But curiosity, combined with something far more troubling, urged me onward. "Hello?" I called again, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Can anyone hear me?" The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. I kept moving, the fuzzy bear clutched tightly in my hand. Then, the cry turned into a soft wail, and I knew I had to find its source. I edged closer to the wall where the drawings were displayed, half hoping that somehow they would come to life and give me answers. I ran my fingers along the crayon lines, feeling the rough texture beneath my fingertips. "Please show me," I muttered half to myself. Just as I voiced my wish, a gentle gust of air surfaced from nowhere, brushing against my face like a whisper. "Help us," it echoed again, clearer now, a plea spilling from the shadows. I shivered. Something was shifting in the atmosphere. With my heart hammering, I triangulated the sound, narrowing down its origin to a corner of the nursery. I stepped forward and collided into the wooden dresser, my shoulder jolting painfully. Gritting my teeth, I steadied myself and called out, "I'm coming!" But the cry faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. My heart sank. Had I scared them away? Just then, a sudden thud reverberated through the room, followed by a series of soft, quick footsteps. They danced across the linoleum floor, echoing against the walls. They were far too small to be an adult's. Fear constricted my throat. "Who's there?" I demanded, forcing my voice to remain steady. There was no reply, only the quiet rush of my breath now sounding overwhelming in my ears. And then I saw it, a flicker at the edge of my flashlight. A small figure darted past, too swift to catch. My stomach dropped. "Stop!" I shouted. Inside the dimly lit space, an impulse drove me to follow. I took off after the shadow, heart racing with each step. The creature darted behind the door leading to the hallway. I flung it open, flooding the corridor with light. But there was nothing. Just the sterile, silent emptiness of the hospital halls. I felt a rush of despair. Had I imagined it? But then I glanced back into the nursery. The light from my phone caught something else on the floor. A small silver locket, gleaming faintly against the dull tiles. I knelt down to pick it up, its weight heavy in my palm. When I opened it, a chilling image stared back at me. Two faces, one resembling the woman from the drawings, and another, an infant whose features mirrored hers perfectly. "This is your child," I whispered, piecing together the fragments of this mystery. But how had it ended up here? Then, the lights flickered again, and the temperature seemed to drop, as if a storm were brewing right behind me. I could feel the tension growing thicker in the air, like static before lightning strikes. I turned, heart racing again, as shadowy figures began to manifest along the walls, their outlines drawn tight with agony. They watched me, waiting. I stumbled back, gasping. Before I could make sense of what I was seeing, a piercing scream filled the room. I froze. "Help us!" It was unmistakably the voice of a child. I bolted back into the nursery, determination flooding through me. Whatever was happening here, I needed to uncover the truth. The stakes had never felt higher, and the shadows were closing in. I took a step back, the locket still clutched in my hand. The shadows moving along the walls felt like they were breathing, writhing with despair and anger. Panic threatened to overtake me, but I fought it off. There had to be something in this room that could guide me. "Who are you?" I shouted into the darkness, desperate for an answer. "What do you want?" Silence answered me, but I noticed a flicker of movement. One of the shadows surged forward, its form shifting and twisting, the outline resembling the child from the drawing. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Please," I said, my voice softer now. "I want to help." In response, the shadowy figure stepped closer, revealing brief glimpses of heartbreak etched into its form. I squinted, trying to make out its features. It was small, just like the child I had seen in the locket. I didn't want to frighten it away, but fear gripped my throat tightly. "I'm not here to hurt you," I promised, inching forward. The dull glow of my phone illuminated part of the nursery, and I noticed the drawings were now aglow with a soft blue light. Each crayon line seemed alive, pulsing as though imbued with a heartbeat. Then with a sudden rush, the shadow surged towards me, and I stumbled back, dropping the locket to the floor. It hit the tiles and bounced, the crack helping to break the haunting spell of despair. "Wait!" I exclaimed as the shadow halted, its form flickering. The locket had landed open, and the child's face showed a fleeting expression of hope, as if calling to the figure. I reached down to grab it again, both fascinated and terrified. The shadow began to transform, slowly shifting shape until I realized it was no longer a shape of anguish. It resembled the woman from the drawings. "Help us," she whispered, her voice a ghostly echo. I looked around frantically. Was this mother trapped as well? "What happened to you?" I questioned, noting the desperation in her appearance. "How do I help?" But before she could answer, the air crackled, a surge of energy coursing through the room like a live wire. The figures on the walls began to dissolve into thick smoke, pulling back from the edges of the room until only the woman remained. I could feel my chest tighten, a suffocating dread overwhelming me. Suddenly, the lights overhead went out, plunging me into complete darkness. The only sound was my own panicked breathing. I fumbled for my phone, a flash of light revealing nothing but emptiness. The presence was gone. "Hello?" I whispered, desperately hoping for an answer that would never come. The child's voice echoed again, but it was distant, fading out of reach. My mind raced, thinking about the locket, the drawings, the woman. Then everything changed. The shadows surged again, pouring back into the nursery with renewed anger. I felt like a cornered animal, trapped in the chaos. "Get out!" A voice boomed, stronger than I'd ever heard, cutting through the fear. I couldn't tell if it was a warning or a command, but instinct kicked in. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. Each step echoed as I sprinted back down the hallway, desperate to escape whatever had been unleashed. But in the depths of my mind, one question flickered like a candle in the dark. What if I was just beginning to understand? I burst through the front doors of the hospital, my heart racing like it could explode. Outside, the night was still and eerily calm. I wiped my brow, trying to shake off the lingering panic. My shift was supposed to start in just a few minutes, and I had to keep myself together. The fluorescent lights inside flickered overhead as I walked to the nurse's station. I couldn't shake off the image of that shadowy figure, or the way it had begged for help. I tried to focus on my work. Maybe anything I had to do would distract me from what had just happened. The first few hours passed normally. I checked on patients, administered medication, and prepared lab work. But as the clock moved toward midnight, an unsettling chill seemed to seep through the walls. The air grew heavy, and the hospital felt different, like it was holding its breath. It started with a patient in room 204. I'd just finished taking her vitals when she looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Do you hear them?" she whispered, her face etched with fear. "Hear what?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "The voices," she said, glancing nervously around the room. "They want me to go with them." A shiver ran down my spine. "No one's here except us," I assured her, even as my heart thudded in my chest. "Just try to rest. I'll be right outside." I stepped into the hallway, my mind racing. Voices? Was this just her medication playing tricks on her? But as I left the room, I thought I heard a faint whisper echoing down the corridor. I brushed it off as my imagination and went back to my duties. But when I returned to the nurse's station, I found the lights flickering again. My colleague Linda sat there, staring at the computer screen with a look of confusion. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "See what?" I replied. "The shadows," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "They were moving." "Linda, it's probably just the lights playing tricks," I tried to coax her. But my voice lacked confidence. Before I could reassure her further, a loud crash echoed from the storage room nearby. We both jumped, exchanging nervous glances. "Did you lock that door?" she asked, panic creeping into her tone. "The one that leads to the supply room?" I said, trying to maintain calm. "Yes." "Let's check it," she suggested, and together we approached the door. Every step felt heavy. I reached out, hesitating before twisting the knob. When I finally opened it, I was met by darkness. Boxes were strewn across the floor, but there was no one else there. Nobody, except a single piece of paper on the ground. I bent down, picking it up. My heart dropped when I saw it. The same drawing of the child from the locket, the same one I had seen in that nursery. "Who drew this?" I muttered, looking at Linda. But she was staring into the shadows behind me, her expression of horror telling me she sensed it too. Then it happened. A cold breeze rushed past, and I felt something wrap around my wrist. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Just darkness, pressing in, tight and suffocating. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just beginning to understand. I was standing at the edge of something far worse than I had imagined. And then the whispers returned, louder this time, swirling around me. I knew I had to act quickly, but I didn't know what to do next. I stood frozen, the whispers wrapping around my mind like tendrils. The air felt thick, almost electric. I could barely breathe. I pulled my arm away from the cold grip, feeling the sudden weight of responsibility. Linda was still behind me, her eyes wide with terror, and I couldn't ignore her. "Get back to the station," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The last thing I wanted was for us to be alone in this dark corner of the hospital. "But," she started. "Now!" I snapped, cutting her off. I turned and rushed back towards the nurse's station, leaving the shadows behind. As I walked, the whispers faded slightly, but I still felt their presence lingering like a dark cloud overhead. Once at the station, I tried to regain my composure. I checked the time. It was almost midnight. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The fluorescent lights flickered above, and I reached for the coffee pot, desperately needing caffeine to keep my nerves in control. Linda came back moments later, her expression a mix of fear and confusion. "What was that?" she asked, her voice still shaky. "I don't know, but whatever it is, we need to be careful," I replied, avoiding her gaze. I stared out into the dimly lit hallway, feeling paranoia creep in. Then, I remembered the patient in room 204. "Linda, what if we check on the woman? Maybe she knows more," I suggested. She nodded, albeit reluctantly. We both gathered our courage and walked slowly toward her room. The sounds of our footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. When we reached the door, I knocked softly and pushed it open. The room was dark, the only light coming from the dim lamp beside the bed. The patient lay there, but her gaze was not on us. It was directed at the corner of the room. "What do you see?" I asked as I approached her bedside. "They're back," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "They want me to leave." I shot a glance at Linda, who looked terrified, then turned back to the patient. "Who are they?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "They won't stop calling," she replied. "They're waiting for me." Just then, a loud thump sounded from behind us. I spun around, my heart pounding. The door to the room had closed on its own. "Linda," I said, my panic rising. I rushed to the door, pulling on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Help!" Linda cried from behind me, backing away from the darkness that was now creeping closer around the patient's bed. The shadows elongated and twisted as if animated by some force, reaching for us. I pulled at the door again, my heart racing. I felt like I was going to suffocate. "We need to get out." That's when I saw it, a figure in the corner, barely illuminated. It was a child, the same one from the drawing, the same sorrowful eyes. "Let her go!" I shouted, but my voice shook. A low whisper filled the room, drowning my words. "Come play with us." I stepped back, bumping into Linda. "We have to find another way out." As I turned, cold air blasted against my face, and the world started to tilt. My heart sank. This was more than just whispers. Something dark was here, and it wanted us. Desperation clawed at my throat. I had to stop this. But how? Then from the corner of my eye, I saw a window. Instinct kicked in and I sprinted toward it, hoping it wasn't locked. But behind me I could hear the child's laughter echoing, chilling me to the bone. I pulled the window open just as shadows danced menacingly closer. I knew I didn't have much time. Grabbing Linda, I shouted, "Now!" But then, everything went dark. I gasped as I came to, suddenly disoriented. The room was still dark, but the oppressive feeling had lifted. I looked around, confusion swirling in my mind. Where was Linda? I pushed myself up, heart racing. "Linda?" I called out, voice shaking. No answer. Gradually, I saw a flicker of light from the nurse's station down the hall. I hurried towards it. Each step was cautious, every creak of the floorboards amplifying my anxiety. My pulse thumped in my ears. I reached the station. Just as I stepped through the doorway, I froze. Linda was there, but she was staring blankly at the computer screen, her face pale. "Linda!" I shouted, but she didn't respond. I waved my hand in front of her eyes, feeling a surge of panic. She blinked and suddenly snapped to attention. What happened? Her voice trembled as she focused on me, confusion still dancing in her eyes. "I think we were in room 204, I managed to say, trying to piece together what happened. "Something took us. I don't remember." "That child," she said, her cheeks flushed. I felt her. She spoke to me. The hairs on my neck stood up. What did she say? Linda took a deep breath. She said she needed help, but she was trapped. Trapped? What does that mean? I pressed, my mind racing. "I don't know," she shouted, frustration intertwining with fear. "But the darkness, it felt alive, like it was pushing us. And the shadows at the foot of the bed, they were reaching for me." I looked toward the hallway, shadows pooling around the corners, as if alive. "We need to leave this place," I insisted, grabbing her arm. "Now." But just as we turned to go, a sudden chill filled the air, and the lights flickered ominously. It was that familiar sense of dread, like the whispers were returning. From the corner of my eye, I noticed something. A dark shadow forming beside the vending machine. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my throat tightening. "See what?" Linda whispered back. The shadow morphed into a shape, a figure cloaked in darkness, and I felt that same grip of fear clenching my chest. "Stay close," I said, moving slowly toward the figure. "Who are you?" No answer came. The shadow expanded, reaching toward us. I tightened my grip on Linda's hand, ready to run if needed. "We have to go." Then, unexpectedly, the figure sank back into the floor and vanished. A moment of silence engulfed us. I looked at Linda, and her face was ashen. "What was that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but we need to find a way out." I turned, prepared to dash toward the exit, but then I felt something cold brush against the back of my neck. I whipped around and saw the child standing in the shadows again, staring at us. "Help me," she said, her voice high and urgent. "Why don't you just leave?" I yelled, frustration bubbling. "Why are you still here?" "I can't." The child's face twisted. "They won't let me." And then, just as the shadows behind her began to writhe, a loud crash came from the direction of the patient rooms. My heart dropped. "Run!" I screamed. But before we could move, the hospital alarm blared, red lights flashing throughout the corridors. The sense of urgency skyrocketed. What else awaited us in this sinister place? As the sound reverberated through the hall, I knew we had to face the unknown, and it felt like the worst was yet to come. The alarm screeched in my ears as I and Linda bolted down the corridor, the harsh red lights flooding the space with an eerie glow. "Where do we go?" she shouted, cut off by the cacophony. I could see the fear reflected in her eyes, pushing me to think fast. "Back to the stairs," I replied. But as I turned, the shadows seemed to thicken. I could feel a weight pressing down on us, urging us to turn back. The child's face lingered in my mind, the anguish palpable in her voice. What did she mean? They won't let me? As we raced past room 210, a sudden movement caught my eye. The door swung wide open, and the figure was back. This time, not as a shadow, but a solid form. It was a woman, her expression twisted in pain. She reached out toward us, lips moving, but no sound emerged. I stumbled to a halt, pulling Linda back. "What the hell is going on?" "I don't know," she cried. "Just keep moving." But my feet were glued to the floor, and curiosity held me captive. I couldn't shake the feeling that she needed help just like the child. "We have to help them." "No, we don't have time." Linda tugged at my arm, eyes wide with panic. But the woman seemed desperate, her silent cries piercing through the chaos around us. Then I finally broke from my trance. "I can't leave her," I shouted, feeling an odd sense of responsibility wash over me. I took a step closer. "What do you want? How can we help you?" The woman's hand trembled as she shook her head, and I felt a cold wave wash over me. The temperature dropped and the lights flickered violently. "Damn it, come on!" Linda yelled, dragging me backward. "Wait!" I looked back, trying to grasp the situation. "Who are you?" I demanded, feeling foolish even as I said it. The woman's eyes locked onto mine, filled with a haunting recognition. "My son," she finally mouthed, anguish evident in her gaze. Just as she formed the words, the shadows surged violently behind her, engulfing her in darkness. "Run!" I yelled again, breaking away from my stupor. "We need to get to the stairs now." Linda dashed ahead and I followed closely, adrenaline propelling us forward. We skidded around a corner, plunging deeper into the hospital's labyrinthine halls. I could still hear the echoes of the woman's silence in my mind, and the thought was a knot in my stomach. As we approached a stairwell door, it swung open, and I nearly collided with a figure rushing out. It was a nurse, her face a mask of terror. "You need to hide," she gasped, eyes darting over her shoulder. "They're coming." "Who?" I asked, panic creeping in again. "You don't understand," she panted. "The shadows. They're angry. They want what they lost." Before I could process her words, a low growl echoed from the direction she had come. The sound seemed to pull the shadows even closer, as if they could hear her too. I glanced at Linda, fear wrinkling her brow. "What do we do?" Just then, the stairwell door blasted open again, and the dark form reappeared, hovering, looming, manifesting before us. Then everything went dark. I jolted awake, gasping for breath, the weight of the darkness lifting. The alarm had stopped, and the hospital felt unusually quiet. I blinked, taking in the stark light of the nurse's station. The fluorescent bulbs hummed above me and I felt disoriented. Was it all a nightmare? I scanned the room, but it was empty. No Linda. "Linda!" I called, but only my voice echoed back. Anxiety clawed at my insides. Had I lost her in the chaos? Had we made it out? I pushed myself up, adrenaline pulsing through my veins, and raced toward the last place I remembered seeing her, the stairwell. I burst through the door, my heart pounding. Each step felt treacherous, as if the shadows themselves were waiting to grab me. The hallways were dim, illuminated only by emergency exit lights. I called for her again. "Linda!" Nothing. The silence settled over the corridor, thick like fog. My instincts screamed for me to keep moving. I glanced toward the maternity ward, the memories sparking to life in my mind like a film reel. What had taken place there? The lullabies, the dark whispers. Was it real? Or had it been an insidious trick of an exhausted mind? I approached the entrance to the ward, dreading what I might find. As I stepped inside, I was met with a chilling air. The crib sat eerily empty, yet I could feel something. A tension hanging like a veil between the world I knew and something darker. Instinctively, I felt drawn back to that crib with the stuffed bear, the one that had been the focus of the lullaby. But before I could reach it, a flicker of movement caught my eye from the corner of the room. I froze. There she was, the woman from before, the one who had pleaded for help. Her figure shimmered in the soft light, her face a mask of sorrow. "Help us," she mouthed, her eyes welling with unspoken pain. I took a step closer, fear mingling with determination. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" She gestured behind her, and the shadows rippled as if they were alive, casting grotesque shapes along the walls. I felt a chill sweep around me, and a whisper echoed in my mind, a child's voice, familiar, yet forlorn. "Help me," it called. Suddenly the lights flickered, flashing erratically. The sound of a distant wailing filled the air, drowning out my racing thoughts. I looked back, my heart thrumming in my chest. The woman vanished, leaving only shadows in her wake. Determined, I sprinted toward the corridor, pushing deeper into the hospital. I needed to find Linda, to make sense of this madness. Every corner I turned felt like a gamble, the air thickening as if I were being enveloped by something sentient. As I moved past a familiar room, I spotted a figure hunched over in the darkness, a nurse, her face pale under the dim light. "Have you seen Linda?" I questioned breathlessly. She looked up, confusion crossing her brow. "Linda. I thought she was... Are you okay?" There was a hesitation in her voice, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was guarding a truth she didn't want to reveal. "I have to find her," I insisted, desperation creeping in, but the nurse only shook her head. "You shouldn't be here. If she was taken, you can't..." The door suddenly crashed open behind me, sending a wave of cold air through the hallway. The shadows from the room surged forward, tangible and filled with anguish. They swept over the floor like a dark tide, closer and closer. "Run!" I shouted to the nurse, grabbing her wrist and pulling her along as we sprinted away. As we raced through the hallways, panic surged in my chest. I could hear the echoes of the child's cries, the whispers of countless souls lost in this place. I couldn't tell if they were pleading for help or warning me away. Finally, we reached the emergency exit, my pulse surging with hope. I pushed the door open, pulling the nurse behind me. We stumbled out into the cool night, the air fresh against our faces. But just as I turned to relish our freedom, I saw her, the child, standing on the threshold of the doorway. "Help me," she whispered again, her small frame glowing softly under the moonlight. A shiver of recognition passed through me. She reached toward me, another abyss of darkness looming behind her, swirling like a storm. "I'm trying," I stammered. But just then, the shadows clawed for the girl, wrapping around her small form. The temperature plummeted again, and all I could hear was her moan of despair, muffled by the encroaching dark. I turned to the nurse. "What do we do?" "The cycle has to end," she said, fear lacing her voice. "End? What does that mean? How do I stop it?" "The love. She needs closure. You have to confront the source." But how could I confront something I didn't even understand? The child's presence faded, swallowed by the shadows, leaving me standing at the precipice of a greater unknown. "Wait!" I cried. But the darkness swallowed her whole. The echo of anguish rang in my ears, urging me to act. I looked back to the nurse, but her eyes mirrored the terror I felt. "We have to go back," I said, determination igniting within me. But as I began to step into the darkness, something unnatural pulled me back, and a question gnawed at my mind. What had truly woven the fabric of this torment? Was it grief? Was it guilt? Or was it simply the unrelenting shadow of something I could never comprehend? I took a deep breath, feeling the chill of the hallways on my skin. I had to face it all again, but the fear coiling in my chest didn't truly fade. I knew the answers awaited me in that suffocating darkness, and the cycle had only just begun.